Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Verdi's Rigoletto, which I saw at the Staatsoper Unter Linden. The conductor was Andres Orozco-Estrada. The production was done by Bartlett Sher. The sets were done by Michael Yergin. The costumes were done by Catherine Zuber. The lights were handled by Donald Holder. The chorus master was Martin Wright, and the dramaturgy was handled by Benjamin Ventig. I was really excited to check out this particular performance of Rigoletto because this was one of Christopher Maltman's first forays into the titular hero, and it was even joined by a cast which really looked good on paper. And before I talk about the singers, I will gladly talk about the production first. Overall, I found the entire staging to be clever, as Bartlett Sher is one of my most favorite opera directors of today. What I really liked about this particular production is that it managed to transport the action from 15th to 16th century Mantua all the way up to Mantua of the 19th and 20th century. We see that in the world of the Duke, everyone is dressed to the nines, and in the first act, we see the Duke and his friends, Borsa, Marullo, and the Count Ceprano being dressed up akin to royalty and the higher ranks of military, and the women of the court being dressed so elegantly. And in the world of Rigoletto, which is the bourgeois world, we see him being dressed initially with a suit and a cane, and once he takes off his suit, we see him in a black and dark red shirt, still with his black pants and black shoes. And Gilda and Giovanna dress semi-formally as well. And in the lower class bourgeois world of Sparafucile and Maddalena, they work in a bar, with Sparafucile being initially dressed up in all black to show his air of mystery that he manages to give off to Rigoletto. And in the bar, he dresses up in a sort of olive green long sleeve shirt, and his sister Maddalena is semi-formally dressed. So there are a lot of interesting things going on with the costumes and the production as a whole. And what I also loved about the production is that there is a huge backdrop of an impressionist painting consisting of earthy and warm colors. In fact, the earthy and warm colors that are pervasive throughout this production manages to show the juxtaposition of the glossy and extravagant lifestyle of the aristocracy and their baseless, lustful passions that they give off to everyone in the court and even the ones lower than them, which managed to make this production absolutely brilliant in its own special way. And there was nothing overly shocking about it either. In fact, there were times that the whole principle of show and don't tell was being done, especially when the courtiers brought in Gilda after the Duke sang his one aria, Farmi vedere le lagrime, and the courtiers bring her in for the Duke to make love to her. And after his cabaletta Possente amor mi chiama, Gilda then hugs the Duke and they proceed to do the you-know-what before Rigoletto comes over. And I have to give a lot of kudos to Bartlett Sher and his team for making this particular production of Rigoletto come alive at the Staatsoper Unter den Linden. And now we get to the singers, starting off with, of course, Christopher Maltman as Rigoletto. I was quite excited to see him sing this particular role because over the years I have been following his career ever since he started off with singing a lot of the Mozartean roles of Papageno, the Count Amaviva from Marriage of Figaro, and of course Don Giovanni, one of his most well-known roles of all time. And as time went on, he started to take on a lot more dramatic parts, such as Carlo di Vargas from La Forza del Destino, Conte di Luna from Trovatore, and many other Verdian parts, especially Rigoletto. And what I managed to hear from him tonight was a lot of power that he managed to emit in this character. He was able to let his voice ring throughout the theater, and he managed to do everything he can in order to make his performance as visceral and as thrilling as it was. Sure, he may not have had the Italianità found in other great baritones such as Piero Capuccilli or Matteo Manduguera, Gian Giacomo Guelfi, Mattia Battistini, Ettore Bastianini, and even Tito Gobbi, among many others, nor did he have the extremely incisive tone of Cheryl Milnes or Robert Merrill or Renato Brusson, just to name a few. But what he managed to offer as Rigoletto was a lot of involvement, a lot of feeling for the character, and a voice that showed no signs of tiredness, no signs of aging, and no signs of trouble whatsoever. He managed to muscle everything through, and for that, he managed to win me over as the audience, as I was completely involved in his performance. So bravo to you, Mr. Maltman. You managed to sell it with the title role, and you deserve all of my praise. Managed to be absolutely amazing from beginning to end. Then we go to The Duke, sung by Michael Fabiano, who has also been singing this role for quite some time. I really love the exuberance and the passion he gives to this character. He managed to imbue a lot of fire and charm into this role, and his singing was just as fine all the way through. However, there were a couple of caveats that I noticed about his voice. There were times that the tones he produced came pretty much from the mask, and that shouldn't always be the case. And sometimes some of his top notes were inconsistent. Some of the top notes sounded really, really good. Other times it sounded flat. Other times it sounded sharp. So there were some inconsistencies going on with his performance, which is kind of a shame because Michael Fabiano has wonderful material to work with. He is a fine lyric tenor, and the timbre of his voice is so pleasing to listen to. However, there were times that the pushed quality in his voice and some of the tones he produced could be ironed out a little bit more. And I hope that he can be able to fix those little issues so that he can further rise above the top and become one of the finest tenors of today. He definitely has a lot of potential, and I do not want to see him waste it. Joining him as Gilda was Nadine Sierra. It should come off as no surprise that Miss Sierra has been singing Gilda all over the world, and this has become one of her signature roles. And what I did like about Nadine Sierra is that she managed to be very dedicated in this part. What I mean is, she managed to throw herself into this role really well. She managed to make her young and quite rebellious as a teenager, and she managed to make her quite complex as a character rather than the sweet little ingenue we would usually associate with Gilda. She managed to embody her coming-of-age nature, from being this sheltered little girl who lives in fear of the world around her to someone who is slowly becoming a woman and starting to experience sexual desires for the first time when she meets the Duke. She managed to give in quite a layered performance of this otherwise lovely little ingenue character. And she did really well in terms of her skills as an actress. And in terms of her voice, it was decent at best. Sure, she may not be the complete package as Luisa Tetrazzini was, nor did she have the pure, silvery tones of Hildeguden or Beverly Sills, nor the richer, creamier tone of Anna Moffo. But what she managed to do with her voice was quite laudable. She managed to throw off those high notes with abandon, especially that high E flat in Si Vendetta, and she managed to sound quite full in her tone. However, there were times that her vowels were on the nasal side, and there were times that the vocal production she did seemed a little bit unusual to my ears and not what I would usually expect in any singer who sings Gilda. For example, I happen to be a major fan of how Beverly Sills used her silvery and focused tone to bring Gilda to life, and I'm even a fan of how Anna Moffo used her fuller, richer tone to bring in a lot of great musicianship to Gilda. As for Nadine Sierra, there were times that she sang a little bit on the nasal side, but I didn't hear any flat notes. It's just that she needs to fix the nasality found in those vowels so that they can become richer, and maybe she can become a much better coloratura soprano than she is today. She definitely has a lot of potential. She has sung in a lot of opera houses all over the world, and I do not want to see her career falter. Grigore Scarupa was a solid sparafuscile. He managed to steal the show in the final act, where he was able to give his all in terms of his voice and in terms of how he managed to let it out. Sure, in the first act, he sounded a little bit underpowered to my ears, but as the opera moved on, he got a lot better. And I thought that the storm scene was him at his best. Yes, there's no doubt that we have at our disposal all the great sparafusciles of the past, namely Giulio Neri, Nicola Moscona, Nicola Zaccaria, Giorgio Tozzi, Cesare Siepi, Marti Talvela, Robert Lloyd, Samuel Ramey, and many other great bassos who have attempted this role. Oh, and I also have to give credit to the likes of Ivo Vinco and Nikolai Gyaurov for embodying this role really well. And I highly recommend Grigori Scarupa to listen to these following names: Nikolai Gyaurov, Cesare Siepi, Giorgio Tozzi, Marti Talvela, Karl Ridabush, Robert Lloyd, Paul Pliszka, Boris Christoph, Gottlob Frick, and Kurt Böhme, so that he can get an idea, and a clear one at that, as to how a true basso voice sounds like. Because as I heard Grigori Scarupa sing the role of Sparafuscile, it sounded more like a bass baritone, or even that of a baritone trying to sing a basso cantante / profondo part, which shouldn't be the case. So I hope that with further development, he can reach to his fullest potential to make his voice rounder and richer like the greats. Singing his sister Madalena was Elena Maximova, and yes, she does have a lovely figure on stage. She manages to sing this role quite well. The chest tones were there. They were quite luscious to listen to. Sometimes there were moments that her head voice didn't sound as full or rich as I would love them to sound like, but regardless, she had really good material to work with. She was a very fine stage actress. She did the role of Madalena well. However, I still have in my ears all the great mezzos of the past, and those include the likes of Margareta Klose, Giulietta Simeonato, and Blanche Thiebaum, just to name a few, and lest I forget about the likes of Rosalind Elias and Huguette Tourangeau. Elena Maximova nonetheless managed to do a fine job with this role, though she could have been a whole lot better. Then we have some young singers who are slowly climbing up into the operatic world. With Monterone, we have Georgi Mikhailishvili, who is a dramatic baritone on the rise to fame. As I listened to him, his voice seemed rich and dark, and he does modulate it quite well. However, there were times that he sounded underpowered. There were times that there was this woolliness and woofiness in his voice. And if you ask me, I really prefer a darker, richer, fuller, and more incisive voice to sing Monterone. Voices like Fernando Corena, Plinio Clavassi, and Clifford Grant, just to name a few. For now, Georgi Mikhailishvili does have a lot of potential. He does have wonderful material to work with. His voice shows so much promise. It does sound like a true baritone sound, complete with that dark, velvety tone. And if he develops his chest voice a lot more, if he strengthens his voice a whole lot more than already is, then we got a baritone who is on the rise to take on a lot more challenging and dramatic parts. Georgi Mikhailishvili is a baritone who has a lot of potential to grow, and with the timbre that he has in his voice, it does seem to go in a really good direction. I just hope that he continues to polish his technique, and I hope that he manages to strengthen his voice much further so that it could reach its full potential. Corina Scheuerle is a lovely Giovanna, but when I compare her voice to Nadine Sierra as Gilda, her voice sounds a lot lighter and brighter than Nadine Sierra, even though she's supposed to be a mezzo. She sounds more of a soprano than Nadine Sierra can sound like, and I highly recommend her to listen to the likes of Ana Di Stasio to hear what a mezzo-soprano really sounds like, and if she wants to take it a step further, she might as well find herself listening to Fedora Barbieri in the 1983 film version of Rigoletto to have a clear idea what a true mezzo-soprano sounds like, complete with richer, sultrier, and rounder tones. In terms of Corina Scheuerle as a singer, she has a light, bright, and sweet voice, which is more of a soprano than a mezzo. At least her stage presence manages to compensate for it, as she does bring in a sort of big sister-like element to Giovanna, rather than the old nanny that we're accustomed to in this particular part. She does a pretty good job in terms of her skills as an actress. She doesn't go too over the top with this part, and that I'll definitely give her credit for. But in terms of her voice as Giovanna, it could be a lot richer because it still sounds like a soprano trying to sing the mezzo parts. We also got some pretty solid singing from Adam Kutny's handsome and dashing Marullo, Andres Moreno Garcia's equally dashing and beautifully toned Borsa, Eric Roseños' strong Count Ceprano and usher of the court, and Serena Saenz, who managed to make such a gorgeous, lovely, and sweet portrayal of the Countess Ceprano and even the page boy. So overall, even though there were some problem spots in the singing, it was still pretty decent. But the one gentleman who stole the show was obviously the one who played Rigoletto, Christopher Maltman. He held the weight of the cast effectively. He managed to shoulder everything through from beginning to end, and he managed to lead the cast with so much professionalism. And what more can you expect from someone like him, who has a lot of experience compared to his other colleagues who are a lot younger than him? He does have so much experience to give, and with a voice like his and with acting like that, I was definitely on the edge of my seat. The conducting done by Andres Orozco-Estrada was solid at best. There were times that he led the orchestra really well in some passages, and I thought that some of the passages he managed to play, he played really well. Unfortunately, there were others that I was not a fan of. The tempo in Cortigiani di Razza Dannata was quite sluggish, and it almost left me bored, and I almost prayed for sleep because of the slightly sluggish tempo. I would have loved for that to be full of drive and vehemence and violence. That's the sort of tempo I would have loved to hear. As in, a slightly speedier tempo would have fit the overall mood and feel of this aria much better than the sluggish one we got, which was quite a shame, because in the later part of Si Vendetta, it managed to build up quite well. So there were some inconsistencies to how some of the musical numbers were being built up. Some of them showed some promise, but they ended up crash landing down into, my goodness, what is with the sluggishness? Regardless of those caveats, he still managed to lead the orchestra and chorus of the Staatsoper Unter den Linden with the best of his abilities. And the chorus and orchestra of the Staatsoper Unter den Linden proved themselves to be strong and absolutely reliable. So overall, with a very interesting production and concept accomplished by Bartlett Sher, Christopher Maltman proving to us, the audience, that he was and will always be a very reliable singer, especially the fact that he was surrounded by a cast of young and talented singers with so much potential, thus making him quite the veteran that he was, and conducting that was slightly hit and miss by Andres Orozco-Estrada. This was an evening that was rather well spent, if only to witness Christopher Maltman tackle Rigoletto. And for those of you who caught this particular production of Rigoletto, what'd you think of it? Did you feel like the production was to your liking? Was there something about it that you really loved? Did you enjoy Christopher Maltman as Rigoletto? Was there another singer who stole his thunder? Or did you feel like there was a singer who managed to not really hold up so well? Comment below and let me know. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in next time for another review. So until then, good night, everybody.